Okay, in this video we're going to have a quick introduction to graphics and in particular bitmap and vector graphics. So these are different ways that we can store and display images on the screen. So we've got two main types. We have bitmaps, which are known also as raster graphics. These are storing individual pixels. So if the image is broken down into little pixels, which are these individual little squares on the screen. So there's a certain number of pixels horizontally and a certain number vertically. Because each little square is stored individually, we keep track of what is actually saved in that individual location. The problem being with that is when we zoom in, as you can see here, the image becomes a lot blockier. Vector graphics are stored using mathematical symbols, so that is known to be scalable. So resizing the image doesn't actually affect the impact of the lines around the edges. They're still nice, smooth curve, whereas the bitmap graphics, it becomes jagged. So we call it sort of tooth edge. And there are different file formats. Bitmap, most common, is BMP, and also for photos, JPEG. Vectors, scalable vector graphics, SVG, are quite common. There are other formats. And there are advantages and disadvantages to each. Now, going through a bitmap, so we've got a little bit of a closer sort of view here. So we can sort of see, we've zoomed in on the byte clock, and as we zoom in on the picture, you can see it becomes a lot more pixelated. With bitmaps, ideally we want to take the image at the highest resolution possible, so that if we need to zoom in or enlarge the picture, we keep as much detail as possible. Because the key thing there is it is made up of pixels, individual dots on the screen. And a pixel is an individual rectangle, and it's a small element that is able to be displayed, basically sort of one square. And each pixel has different properties to it. So it has, what color it is, and that's usually made up of RGB, made up of light spectrum, how much red is in there, how much green, how much blue. And that's what we term to our bit depth. And that color depth refers to how many colors can be displayed. We're going to look at some different examples of that in a little bit. And as I mentioned, they lose detail when we enlarge or zoom in. Vector graphics, they use mathematical statements to draw these graphics. So it means we can resize them and change their sort of shape and appearance quite easily without losing any detail. But to do that, we need to know a few properties. So we need to know locations. So you might need a starting point for drawing the shape. This we might need to know, what direction. So it's length, how many are the pixels or centimeters to go in that direction. Same with the width, if we're drawing a rectangle. And then there are other properties, like the line width. So how wide is that red line going to be? What color will that line be? What is the fill color going to be in the middle? So in this case, it's white. And for the oval, you might need different sort of rules for that. So you might have a center point, so our origin, and then its height and width, and then the mathematical formula for drawing an oval. Key thing here is that they keep the detail when we resize them. Moving on to these, what does it actually mean in terms of our images? We often have our screens, and different companies pitch them in different ways. Apple talks about its retina displays, which generally just means you can't see a pixel on the screen. But resolutions come in a lot of different qualities, and we measure it in terms of how many pixels wide by how many high. So early computers, they used CGA, the computer graphics array. This was generally capable of storing 4 different colors, and it was only 320 pixels wide, so 320 dots across, and 200 pixels high. If we look at HD video, so here 1080p, that is at HD. So if we look at its size here, this is the standard sort of video format that we're getting these days. Is basically that resolution. So 1920 pixels across and 1080 pixels vertically. Now there are different other formats. A lot of computer screens fit into different sort of sizes. Sometimes that's the WXGA, which is about 1280 by 800, or the 1650 by 1050, but becoming more and more common on computer screens for at least a full HD. Now where things are moving towards is what we call 4K or UHD1. There's a bit of argument over which is the exact sort of format. UHD is essentially, or 4K is 4 times the resolution of our 1080p. Now, obviously, this is a lot more pixels to sort of render. So we're just going to switch into Excel and we're going to have a look at how many pixels each of these actually displays. So we're going to take a look at CGA, 1080, and then 4K. Okay, so we're going to just put height, total spelling, width. These are going to be in pixels. I'm just going to merge that so it's a bit clear. Let's zoom in so we can sort of see it a bit easier. We're going to have CGA, 1080, and 4K, which we also often refer to as UHD. So CGA is 220 pixels high by 200 wide. 1080 is 1920 high. Oh no, so 1080 high by 1920. So I've got these around the wrong way. We often do width by height. So this is 2160 by 3840. It's basically twice the resolution. So we're going to just have a little formula for the total number of pixels here. It's going to have equals the height times the width, and let's drag that down. So only 664,000 pixels need to be displayed for CGA, and at 1080 we've got basically 2 million pixels on the entire screen. 4K, it jumps up to 8 million, so it has to change 8 million pixels every single time the screen updates. So that's our main things for resolution. So the higher the resolution, the more pixels are stored, the more data needs to be displayed. So if you have a 4K display but your original image is only at 1080p, it's still going to look pixelated. So it's going to have to use, for every 1 pixel that's in 1080, it's going to have to use 4 for the 4K version. And this is where we want to start looking at now what's called bit depth. So the amount of colors that can be stored. So a bit, or binary digit, is a single 0 or 1 that's stored by the computers. It's our fundamental building block for a computer. And the higher the resolution of a picture, or the screen, the more pixels are required, as we've just seen. And on top of that, we have the more colors that we're going to store on the screen, the more bits we need. So if we're just going to have a black and white image, we only need 1 bit, because let's say 0 for black, 1 for white. If we've got 4 colors, let's say cyan, magenta, black and white, we need 2 bits, which is 2 to the power 2, which gives us 4 options. 16 colors, we need 4 bits, which is 2 to the power 4, which gives us 16 options. 256 colors, we need 8 bits, 2 to the power 8. Or if we want 16.7 million colors, which is what most screens sort of display, we're going to use 24 bit, which is 2 to the power 24. Now, if we talk about file size, so let's have a look here. So let's just say 1 bit, and we'll just do 4 bit, no, let's do 8-bit and 24-bit. So this is going to be equals that times the 1-bit, that times the 8 bits, and that times 24 bits. So you can see, just by increasing the color depth, this number is getting far too big. So let's zoom out a little bit, see if we can rectify that. Stretch that so we can actually see our number. So for a CGA graphic, at 1-bit, we're just storing 64,000 bits. At 8-bit, 512,000 bits. 24-bit, CGA resolution, 1.5 million bits. If we go up to 4K, we are looking at 199 to nearly 2 million bits just to display one image. You drop that down to 8-bit, it goes all the way down to 66 million. So there's quite big changes there. So that is what we're looking at in terms of our bits and binary digits and resolution. The key things to take away: the more colors you have, the more bits you need to store each bit of color. The higher the resolution, the more bits or pixels you have, so the more bits of information you're going to need to store, if you're storing it as a bitmap graphic, because it's storing each individual pixel, each individual bitmap. If you're having a vector, sometimes you might have those as a smaller image or smaller file size because you're just storing the mathematical calculation, but it can't store as much detail as photos and bitmaps because it's not storing each individual pixel's piece of information. So there are reasons you might need to use each. Remember, bitmap, if you enlarge it, if you zoom in, it's going to become pixelated if you get too far because you can't add in extra details. A vector graphic, you can resize and it will keep all of the details.